Hi there, this lesson is about how to graph lines that are not in slope-intercept form. And I'm starting you off with the equation y equals mx plus b because that is in slope-intercept form. Remember that the m is the slope, and that tells us how much to rise and how much to run. And the y-intercept is the b, and this is why we call it the slope-intercept form of a line, because it tells us the slope and it tells us the y-intercept. Today's lesson, though, is about how to graph when it's not in that form. So what we're going to do is we're going to take equations and put them in that form. On your worksheet, number 1 says 2x plus 3y equals 12. In order to graph this, there are a couple different ways we can do it. The first way I'm going to show you is putting it in slope-intercept form, which means we have to get y all by itself. And we use our properties of equality to get the y by itself. The first thing I need to do is get rid of 2x. So I'm going to subtract 2x from each side, but realize that the 12 and the 2x cannot be combined on the right-hand side of the equation because they are not like terms. So 2x minus 2x on the left-hand side equals 0, so those cancel. I'm left with 3y, and then on the other side I have the 12 and the negative 2x. I cannot combine them, and since I want my x's to come first, I'm going to put negative 2x first, and then plus 12. Now we're not quite there yet because the y has to be by itself. Right now it has a 3 with it. So the next step is to divide both sides of the equation by 3. That allows us to cancel the 3's here because 3 divided by 3 is 1. So we are left with y equals, which is what we wanted. Now, on the right-hand side, I'm going to show you that we have mx, so it's negative 2/3 x. And we also have our b here, 12 over 3. Well, I'm going to simplify that. 12 over 3 is 4. So now I have my slope, which is negative 2/3, and my y-intercept, which is 4. Now it's a very easy equation to graph. So I'm going to start with my y-intercept of 4. So I plot my y-intercept of 4 on my graph. And remember that the slope tells us to rise negative 2, which means I need to go down 2, and run 3, which means I need to go right 3. And we start from the point that I already plotted. So from the 4, I'm going to go down 2 and right 3, and I'm going to plot another point. I'm going to continue that pattern. Down 2, right 3, down 2, right 3. But I also want to continue the pattern in the other direction. So instead of going down 2 and right 3, I'm going to go up 2 and left 3. Up 2 and left 3. Up 2 and left 3. And therefore, I have plotted all across my grid. Now just grab any kind of a straight edge. It does not have to be a ruler. It could be anything that has a straight edge with it, and connect the dots. And put your arrows, and we are done with that problem. Now I want to discuss a couple things. I said there was more than one way to graph this one. So let's take a look at the original equation, and it was 2x plus 3y equals 12. So I'm going to show you a different way to do this, and we can find the x-intercept and the y-intercept. The x-intercept occurs where y equals 0. So if I plug 0 in for the y here, that's 3 times 0, so that goes away. So now I'm left with 2x equals 12. And if I solve that for x, I get x equals 6. Notice my my x-intercept, my graph hits the x-axis at 6. So that confirms that that is the right point. Now let's find the y-intercept. The original problem again was 2x plus 3y equals 12. And to find the y-intercept, that occurs where x equals 0. So if I take the x value and plug 0 in for it, that's 2 times 0, which cancels out, and I'm left with 3y equals 12. If I solve that for y, I get y equals 4, and looking at the graph right here, the y value was 4 when x was 0. That's the y-intercept. So that tells me that that graph was accurate as well. So I could have just figured out the x and y intercepts and then connected the dots with my line. Let's move on to example number 2. And on this one, we're going to solve for y. So that means I have to get rid of the 2x. So I need to subtract 2x from both sides. When I do that, 2x minus 2x is 0, and this negative 5y drops down. Make sure that you understand that that's a negative 5y. And then because we like our x's to come before the constant 15, I'm going to put negative 2x plus 15. My next step is to get the y by itself by dividing by negative 5. And negative 5 divided by negative 5 is 1, so I'm left with y equals, which is what I wanted. And then if I take a look at my m value, I have negative 2 divided by negative 5. Two negatives make a positive when you divide them, so I'm going to just put 2/5. And then we have our x. And then my y-intercept is going to be 15 divided by negative 5. So that's negative 3. So I could have put minus 3, or I could put plus a negative 3. Those mean the exact same thing. Now we're ready to graph. So if I plot my y-intercept first, I'm going to plot negative 3 on the y-axis. And my slope is 2 over 5. So that tells me I'm going to rise 2 and I'm going to run 5. So from my y-intercept, I'm going to go up 2 and right 5. Do it again, up 2, right 5. I want to go in the other direction as well, so I'm going to go down 2 and left 5, down 2 and left 5. I've covered all of my grid, so I grab a straight edge and I connect the dots. And there's my line. Now I'm going to go ahead and show you how to find the x and y intercepts again. 2x minus 5y equals 15 was the original. So my x-intercept is again where y equals 0. So if I find my x-intercept, I'm going to plug 0 in for y. Negative 5 times 0 is 0, so that goes away. I'm left with 2x equals 15. Divide both sides by 2. X equals 7.5. Now this one probably would not be the best decision to just find the x and y intercepts, simply because 7.5 is a little difficult to graph accurately. It will work, but it's probably best to do it the way I did it at the beginning. Now let's find the y-intercept. So that means I am going to plug in 0 for the x. So we have 2x minus 5y equals 15. To find the y-intercept, I'm going to plug 0 in for the x. Here's 0 for the x, so I plug in 0 here. 2 times 0 is 0. I'm left with negative 5y equals 15. Divide both sides by negative 5. And that gives me my y equals negative 3, which I already had here was my y-intercept. Alright, moving on to example 3. Now, example 3 is a little different because we don't have an x involved. Can I put this in y equals mx plus b form? Well, if I don't have an x, that means I have 0 x's. And if I have 0 x's, that means this doesn't exist. So I just have y equals b. And here I have y equals 3. So yes, it does work. The b value, which is my y-intercept, is 3. My slope, which I don't see, is 0. So our horizontal lines have slope of 0, and here we have a slope of 0. So we know it's going to be a horizontal line. Our y-intercept is 3, so we're going to plot our y-intercept of 3 right here. And our slope is 0, which means we rise 0, and we run as much as we want. So I'm going to put a 1 here because 0 over 1 is 0. So I rise 0 and I run 1, and I continue that pattern all the way across, and I connect my dots, and there is my horizontal line. So when we have y equals a number, that will always result in a horizontal line, because horizontal has slope of 0. You thought you would get away with not hearing that, but you were wrong. Alright, let's move on to the next example. In example 4, we have x equals negative 5. Can we put this one into y equals mx plus b? Well, we don't have a y, so that means that this number in front of y is 0. That does not fit our slope-intercept form, so we cannot put it into slope-intercept form. If you think about what I taught you about finding x and y intercepts, to find the x-intercept, that's where y equals 0. There is no y here, so the x-intercept is negative 5. And to find the y-intercept, you plug in 0 for the x, but if you plug in 0 for the x, right here, we would end up with 0 equals negative 5. And that obviously does not work. So that means that there is no y-intercept. And we talked before break about if it doesn't have a y-intercept, it will never touch the y-axis, and therefore it has to be a vertical line. So we go to the x-intercept of -5, and it will never touch the y-axis, so that means it has to be parallel to the y-axis. So we have a vertical line at x equals -5. Moving on to example 5. This one is like the first two. So we're going to solve for y, which means I have to get rid of that 7x. So I'm going to take away 7x from both sides. 7x minus 7x is 0, so that goes away. The 2y drops down. And because we like our x's to be first, I'm going to put -7x first, and then plus 6. And the next step is that we need y by itself, so we divide by 2 on both sides, and 2 divided by 2 is 1, so we get y equals, which is what we wanted, and then my slope is going to be -7 over 2. I have my x there, and my y-intercept is going to be 6 over 2, which simplifies to be 3. So now I can use my y-intercept of 3, plot that on the y-axis, and my slope is rise -7, so that means I go down 7, and run 2, so that means I go right 2. So from my y-intercept, I'm going to go down 7 and right 2. If I try to do that again, down 7, I will be off of my grid, so I'm not going to worry about that. Oops, I just realized I put the point in the wrong spot. Down 7 and right 2 would be at -4, 2. And then if I tried to do it again, I'm off my grid just by 1, so I might just put a little dot there anyway, off the grid. I can also go in the opposite direction, so I can go up 7 and left 2 and have a point there. That gives me points all the way across my grid. I grab my straight edge and oops, I need to connect the dots. All right. Okay, so let's move on to the last example, example 6. I need to get the y by itself here, which means I have to take away x from both sides. So x minus x is 0. That means -2y drops down. And if I continue on the right-hand side, I like my x's to come first, so I have -x, and then I have a -10 or -10. The next step is to get y by itself by dividing by -2. Now keep in mind that the coefficient in front of the x, right here, is a 1, a -1. So I'm going to put a 1 there so I remember that. Alright, on the left-hand side, -2 divided by -2 is 1. So I get y equals, and then my slope is -1 over -2. Negative divided by a negative is a positive, so I'm going to say that's 1/2. Then I have my x, and then my y-intercept is -10 divided by -2, which is a +5. So my y-intercept is +5, and my slope is up 1, right 2, up 1, right 2. Continue that pattern all the way across the grid. And I can also go down 1 and left 2. Now I have points going all the way across my grid. I can grab my straight edge and connect the dots. Oh, that's way off. All right. All right, what you need to do now is go to a Google Docs form and fill out the survey to receive credit for this assignment. Here is the URL that you need, and unfortunately you cannot just click on this and it will take you to the form. You have to either highlight, copy, and paste it into your URL, or actually type it into your URL and it will take you to the Google Forms that you need to fill out. It's a very, very brief questionnaire to make sure you understood what we talked about in this lesson. Have a great day.